Hello, my name is Scott Robertson. On this DVD, I'm going to walk you through a process I've been experimenting with in the creation of unique environments for the artwork of Concept Design 2. This process I find very, very fun. It's sort of like a happy accident process. You're going to start with a bunch of loose marker sketches of just abstract forms done with grayscale markers on vellum and mylar. Once I have those sketches, I'm going to do about 8 of those, with a focus not so much on is this a cityscape, is this a landscape, no focus there, but really just a focus on coming up with interesting shapes with a little bit of atmospheric perspective, but really with no intention of what's the scale of things, meaning the people, the vehicles, things like that, but really just abstract shapes. Once I have those 8 sketches done, I'm going to scan those, we'll take those into Photoshop, and we're going to composite them on separate layers. Once we have all those sketches stacked on top of each other in Photoshop in one master file, we're going to start to play with the compositing methods inside Photoshop. So we're going to switch the layers to multiply and overlay and color dodge and exclusion and difference, and we're going to come up with some very interesting color palettes. And then we're going to go in and we're going to search. We get to become a photographer for a while. We travel through this abstract environment, and we're going to capture stills from this abstract composited master file. I'm going to save out probably a dozen or more of those. And once we have all those still images, I'm going to come back in and start painting back on top of those. And then at that point, it's really a traditional painting process, and it's really how not to screw up what you liked in the original file that you captured. I hope you like the process. I find it extremely fun. I have included on this DVD in the bonus section all the files you see behind me in their unflattened stages. Also the original 8 marker sketches, so feel free to recomposite those. Come up with your own interesting compositions. By all means, do your own marker sketches. And I really think you'll have fun with the process. It's very liberating. So let's get started, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, here we go. We've got a pad of vellum. And to do this sort of shape-based abstract environment sketching, we're going to first start with markers, and we're going to end up, of course, in Photoshop. But these are the markers that I like to use. So first let's talk about the paper and the media. So I like to use these Copic markers. In fact, I like those really wide ones are my favorites, as you'll see here. So I'm about to do 8 sketches for you. This is being the first. And you'll see it's very, very rapid. Of course, I've sped it up here so we can squeeze on more content. But the idea here is that you enter into each one of these little marker sketches without the concern for detail or even what the shapes might be. When I do these sketches, I'm really just, you could do this with wet media as well, meaning, with some acrylic or watercolor. Here the theme is obviously circles. So just this big sort of orb, and working in a little more value. Usually start with that 10 or 20% gray, and then working a little bit darker to pull out some more detail. I'm really just trying to look for variety of texture and variety of shape, and also variety of value. Our brain will fill in all the rest. We can't help but see depth here, right, as we start working background to foreground, and increasing the contrast in the foreground pieces. Things will start to float off of each other. Here, mixing up the marker strokes too, and you can multiply them and copy them and flip them upside down, and really experiment with the power of Photoshop gives you with this sort of layer compositing. Here's our last one getting sized. See there, make that one very horizontal. Okay, now I'm going to crop this. So I'm just cropping back to the original size of the image to get rid of all that extra stuff that was outside my border. By doing that, it makes my file size a little bit smaller, lets my machine run a little more efficiently. Okay, now what you do is you go into each layer and you start playing with the compositing methods. Now there's no right or wrong here. It's just trying to come up with interesting color palette and letting those shapes mix together. So you'll see that I'll just experiment a lot. Here I'm experimenting with the opacity of that layer. And that layer was set on exclusion. Now I've moved it up and tried a different setting. Try overlay. That one's difference. Try difference and see what difference gives you. You start getting, it will be the same exact size of the area that you selected. And don't worry if you missed that. I'm going to do that a lot. So we're going to pull about, well, I don't know, maybe a dozen of these little compositions. So what you have to start to do is imagine these are like story starts. You know, what's going on here? Why is this environment that color? What are the shapes? Do you see a horizon line off in the distance? Do you see a vehicle of some sort? Do you see a figure somewhere? It's a lot like being a kid and looking at clouds and imagining, you know, them as being anything interesting. Changing the opacity, you know, looking for shapes. A lot of times what I look for is I look for a horizon. It's getting kind of interesting on that one. I see those little specks there as maybe being people, you know, trudging through the snow maybe, because it's all this sort of, you know, light value painting. You know, there's a lot of... All right, we jump right into the next one. This is the marker sketch that I captured. In this case, I see a very strong light source off in the distance there. And I'm going to come in and start simplifying. I saw a bridge right there, actually. Just our side of that opening off in the distance where the light is. And I'm just setting up some stepping here for the depth, defining a little bit of that archway. So I see that I've started out drawing had I set out to draw this, and I really didn't have an idea for a story, but a story is starting to arrive as we see the environment and we see the colors. We hint at some figures and a plane they're walking on. So let's zoom in a little bit. Here's my figures walking along the path, come across that bridge. We're inside this very large cave. I don't really have the sense that it's much of a cave yet. We might need to darken it down. There you can see the painting I've done so far just on one single layer. And usually paint right on a layer on top of the background. Just threw a layer on top there with a gradation and put it on multiply, trying to darken down that cave. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to erase out where the light source is at. So I've darkened down from above and then coming in here and just erasing where I want that light source. That hole's maybe a bit too strong compositionally, but if I was going to spend more time on this, I'd have to revisit that guy and see that it wasn't catching my eye a little too much. I'm going to erase out some of that multiply layer again, illuminating, in effect, illuminating some more of our elements. There we are. If you squint your eyes at it, it works. There's our... And I can play with the opacity of this guy, that top layer. And increase the contrast by going into levels. I'm going to put another adjustment layer on top. I'm experimenting now with the hue. Is this really the color we want? So I've done that with an adjustment layer. So go to Layers, New Adjustment Layer. And it doesn't affect your layers below. You can turn it off and on, but it doesn't ruin the painting underneath. And there we go. That's sort of the completion of that little quick sketch.